Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome, everyone. This is the More Money Show. I am your host, Steve Moore. It is always such a privilege and a pleasure to be able to be with you every Saturday afternoon, 52 weeks of the year. We are live today, by the way. We are live and in color. And I will be taking your calls because it's my favorite part of the show. We're on for 2 hours. For those of you who are not familiar with the More Money Show, we talk about politics, we talk about the economy, we talk about finance, and we talk about how you can make more money. We are live and in color. By the way, if you turn on just almost any other station, and I don't want you to do that, I want you to stick with us, but you're going to hear boring infomercials or things like that. We're going to have some great guests on today, but also we like to listen to what you have to say. This is Freedom of Speech Radio. And I've always said to my great friend, John Catsimatidis, who is the one who has resurrected this great radio station, you have, thanks to you all, I say to John Catsimatidis, you have the smartest and most intelligent and educated and thoughtful radio audience in the country. And I mean that because I know it because I take your calls, not every week, but about every other week I do. And I'm just amazed at the great insights that you all have. And so I will be taking your calls. One of the topics that I want to talk about today, it's something we've talked about in weeks past, but it's such an important one. It's about how we get the Trump tax cut that was passed in 2017 that Art Laffer and Larry Kudlow and I and some others helped write. Not only do we need to make that permanent, but my friend Steve Forbes and I had a piece in the Wall Street Journal a few days ago making the point that Trump should go for the gold, he should think big, and we should finally have a flat tax with a postcard tax return that you could fill out in 10 minutes, not 10 hours, not 10 days, not 10 weeks. And it's simple, it is fair, it is efficient, it would be rocket fuel for the U.S. economy. And what Steve Forbes and I said in our piece, and you can look it up on wallstreetjournal.com in the opinion section, is Trump has taken us halfway there to a flat tax. He has lowered the rates. He's broadened the tax base, gotten rid of a lot of the deductions and loopholes and special interest provisions in the tax code, which I find horrendous. Get rid of those and get the rates down as low as possible. No special interest, provisions for the big corporations or the millionaires and billionaires in this country. And I'm not against millionaires and billionaires, but I don't think they should get special tax breaks. I don't think any of you do. That's something that we as Republicans, Democrats, and independents all agree on, that special interest provisions and sweetheart deals are not what our government should be about. And so what Steve Forbes and I are arguing is, let's get the rate down to 15%, maybe 16. I'd even take 20%, but I don't want to negotiate with myself here. We said in the Wall Street Journal, we think we could get it down to 15%. That's what Donald Trump has said. He said he wants, if you invest in the United States, and you hire American workers on your profits, you're going to pay a 15% tax. Now, what I would like to see is a 15% tax on the profits of every company. And I'd like to see the income tax rate 15%. And I'd like to see the capital gains tax rate 15%. and I'd like to see the dividend tax 15%, and I'd like to see the death tax 15%. I'd like to get rid of the death tax, but I'd take 15%. I think 15% would be okay. If you've got a $10 million estate, you'd pay $1.5 million tax, not some places in the country have 40, 50% tax rate on estates, which is outrageous. And if we do this, it would be so simple, so pro-growth. I want to hear somebody call in, if you will, and later in the show. We're taking your calls in the second hour, not this first hour, so don't call in yet. And just to remind you, the More Money hotline number is 1-800-848-9222. But if you have an objection to the flat tax, I'd love to hear it, because I think it would be so good for American workers. And I know some of you might call it, oh, it's a big tax cut for the rich. Now let me get to the second part of this, though. And this is the key insight in the piece that Steve Forbes and I wrote in the Wall Street Journal. Today, 91% of Americans do not itemize their deductions. In other words, they just check the box for the standard deduction, which we doubled under Trump, which was very smart. And that means the vast, vast majority of people around the country are not, they don't care about deductions because they just check the box. They don't take the charitable deduction. They don't take the mortgage deduction. They don't take the bond, interest rate reduction, all of these other special interest provisions. So we could just get rid of those. And by the way, the 9% who still take advantage of these deductions, guess what? They're predominantly, and I know that's not entirely true, but it's mostly true, that these are millionaires and billionaires. So these are the special interest playground provisions for the, Bill Gates and Warren Buffetts of the world. Take away those special interest provisions. And by the way, why are universities tax deductible? Why should they not pay property taxes? Why should they not pay income taxes? Why are the endowments not taxed? You've got hundreds of billions. So there's a lot we could tax, and I'm anti-tax, folks. You know that. If you're a regular listener to this show, you know I'm not a fan of high taxes, but I do want a broad tax base where everybody's paying their fair share, but at a low rate. And I'm here to tell you, I think that would absolutely cause our economy to soar. And it's a good way to bring down the deficit, by the way, because you put more people back to work, more investment in the United States, more businesses, people doing better. As you do better, you pay more. 15% of $50,000 is a lot less than 15% of 100,000 or 200,000 or 300,000. So you expand the pie, you make the economy better, you make it simple, you put a lot of tax accountants out of work. I'm in favor of it. But if you're not in favor of it, I'd love to hear why. Why do you think that that's not the way to go? Because the way I see it, the only people who are going to lose are tax accountants and lawyers and people who live in the swamp of Washington, D.C. Couple of quick points. We got an action-jammed show today, but I want to mention a few things before we take our first break. One is that I was listening to the newscast that just came on right before I came on, and I've been following peripherally this debate that's been going on in New York, and I know many of our listeners, but not all of you, live in the New York metropolitan area. And what is with this congestion pricing idea? It is so insane to me that they would want to raise taxes on people coming into Manhattan. I'm sorry, I do not understand that. Don't the politicians realize that New York is being destroyed by high taxes? Don't they realize the problem with Manhattan these days is that people are leaving? In fact, I just got literally someone just sent this to me this morning, the U-Haul provisions. So basically what happens is U-Haul puts out a report every year about, where people are moving to and where they are moving from. And what I found to be really interesting about this it just came out a couple of days ago. By the way, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention Happy New Year, everyone. Happy New Year. I hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas. We're still kind of in the holiday season. We got a couple more days before we all have to go back to work full time. But this data is amazing. It shows a couple things. One is 23 of the 25 cities, this is amazing, 23 of the 25 cities with the most growth in terms of people coming in were were in red states. Were in red states. So, in fact, the state that got the most in traffic of U-Hauls was, believe it or not, South Carolina, down there in Dixie. And then you've got Florida, you got Texas, you've got North Carolina, and those states are doing great. And then you look at the states that did the worst, and it's sad. I mean, here they are. I got them right here. Okay, California had the most people moving out on a per capita basis. California is being ruined by progressive governance. The second worst state in terms of people moving out is Massachusetts. And Massachusetts, just these morons in Boston just raised their income tax rate again. Now Massachusetts has a rate nearly as high as New York. Guess what? People move out. You raise their taxes, people move. The third worst state, the third state that lost the most people to U-Hauls, in other words, people packing up their homes, selling their house, and moving somewhere else, moving south or moving west, was New Jersey. New Jersey was the third biggest loser. And then ding, 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 number 4, you know what state that was, New York. New York lost a huge number of people. So here's the point. What congestion, what are they talking about? Why are they trying to put more taxes on people who want to come into New York when fewer and fewer people are coming in already? They're just going to chase more people out of the great city of New York. And look, for those of you who are regular listeners to this show, you know I love America's cities. I like New York. I love Chicago. I love Los Angeles. I love San Francisco. I love Milwaukee. I think, we've got these amazing cities in this country that are being destroyed by politicians who want to raise taxes, raise regulations, do all these things that are harmful to the people who live in these cities. And what you do is you drive out the rich people, and the only people who are left tend to be the people of lower income. The jobs leave when the rich people leave. And I don't understand the mentality. So if somebody wants to call in, a New Yorker, and explain to me why there should be a congestion tax, I'd like to hear it, because I think New York needs more people, not less people. And that is very clear. Mention one other quick thing. We got 30 seconds before we have to take a break. Did you see masks are coming back? Masks, from COVID era. Masks didn't make much difference. The evidence isn't very clear. It's pretty clear that masks had a very, very minuscule effect in terms of the transmission of the virus. But there is a virus going on, by the way. My wife has been sick for the last 5 or 6 days. She's not, she's just stuffed up and she doesn't feel well. She doesn't have the great energy. It's what we used to call the flu, right? And she has the flu, and it's not a pleasant thing. I hate getting sick like that. But I don't think that there's much evidence that masks are going to do much. And if you want to wear masks, that's fine. I mean, it's a free country, but I don't think the government should be mandating them. Okay, folks, we're going to take a break. We will be right back. This is the More Money Show on WABC. I hope you're having a wonderful holiday weekend. And get out, by the way. Get outside after the show is over, because it is cold out, but it's clear. It's sunny, and some of that brisk, weather can be very invigorating. We'll be right back.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. Thank you so much for joining on this first Sunday of the year 2025. I hope everybody had a wonderful New Year's. So my first guest this afternoon is somebody I've admired for a long, long time, Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin. You know him from his frequent appearances on Fox News and Fox Business News. He's a good friend of your and my buddy Larry Kudlow. Senator Johnson, thanks so much for joining, and Happy New Year.
Well, Steve, a Happy New Year to you. And I was just thinking the first time we met was Christmas Eve 2009, right after they passed Obamacare, in a store on Michigan Avenue in Chicago.
I remember that. I remember that very clearly. And so you have been, is this your second or third term now that you've been in the Senate?
Yeah, this was my third term. Got reelected in 2022.
Amazing. So you've been one of the reason I wanted to have Senator Johnson on is he is one of the, well, I shouldn't say the few. There are some, but not a whole lot of people who have a fiscal conscience. Senator, I don't mean to demean your colleagues, but sometimes even the Republicans like to spend money. You know that. And you've always been the fiscal conscience of the Senate. By the way, we're going to have later on the show, I don't know if you ever overlapped with Phil Gramm of Texas, but he also was an amazing fiscal conservative. Why are there not more fiscal conservatives in Congress?
Because the American public isn't demanding it. Most Americans kind of like getting free money from the federal government, and that's very unfortunate. The other thing we obviously share is our desire to simplify the tax code, which I think set this interview up. You wrote an excellent column in the Wall Street Journal with Steve Forbes, and I know Phil Gramm writes some excellent columns as well. So we follow each other on the Wall Street Journal, but your column with Steve Forbes is, again, what hopefully we can get Scott Bessent and other members of the administration interested in, not only making sure we don't get a massive automatic tax increase in 2026, but while we're doing that, let's simplify and rationalize our tax code. I'm totally on board with trying to do that.
Well, thank you. I mean, we've got a huge response on that piece, and I think people do want simplicity. It's a way of draining the swamp, Senator, as you know. If you make the tax code really simple and really, low rates, broad-based, but not a lot of special interest provisions, then a lot of the tax accountants, all the lobbyists would kind of go, wait, what are they going to lobby on if they can't lobby for all these special interest loopholes?
Well, proof of that is, the first piece of legislation we took up after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that generational tax reform, was the tax extender package.
Yes. Yeah.
Slap your forehead on that one. So again, so why does Washington do that? Because it keeps lobbyists, it keeps corporations coming, begging for their particular tax treatment. So no, a dramatic simplification. And I also throw in rationalization. So let's make the tax code rational.
When you first ran for Senate, maybe I forget, it was 10, 12, 14 years ago or so, you were a businessman. You were not a politician. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was literally 5 months after I met you, walking my daughter, and I said, there's a good guy right there. And you kind of turned around because I've been following you. I've known you longer than you've known me. And so we just had a nice conversation, a lowly accountant from Oshkosh, and we talked about that. And then I decided to run literally.
Yeah. What inspired you? Because I remember that time we met before you were a senator, and most people kind of rise up the ranks. They run for city council, and then they run for the state legislature, and then they run for Congress or Senate. They just move up the ladder. You had not been. Is this your first elected position?
Oh yeah, no. It was the passage of Obamacare, and that's what they had passed the day that we met, and that's what that's what we talked about. Is they passed that in the wee hours of the morning on Christmas Eve 2009. Plus, back then we were $14 trillion in debt. Mortgage
now we're 37.
Now, yeah. So those are the two main issues. But really, is long term, it's the fact that we are mortgaging our kids' future. What I wrote in my recent column is we've devalued the dollar since 1998.
Yeah,
it's now worth 51 cents.
Yep. That was a great piece.
That's what we've done.
In fact, that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, Senator, is that you had a piece in the Wall Street Journal as well. I think it was just a few days ago. I remember reading it. Tell folks the essence of your argument in that piece.
Well, a few numbers. I know Washington doesn't like talking about numbers, but in 2019, before the pandemic, total federal spending was $4.4 trillion. Now, then you have
by the way, Senator, hold on, Senator. I'm writing these numbers down as you speak. So we had a $4.4 billion budget in what year was that, 2019?
Yeah, trillion, 4.4 trillion.
Okay.
And then we went to 6.5 trillion during the pandemic 2020, and we never looked back. We just established $6 trillion as the baseline. This year, President Biden wants to spend about 7.3 trillion, which is 63% higher than the 2019 spending, where our population has only grown 2.2%.
Amazing.
So my column suggests that we go back to a pre-pandemic base year, grow that spending by population growth, inflation. If we went back to 1998,
Yes.
And inflated those dollars. Again, you leave Medicare, Social Security, and interest alone. That you spend what you spend. But all other spending, you just inflate by population and inflation. We literally would have a balanced budget this year, Steve. That's how dramatic it would be. And I don't think we spent too less in 1998.
It's amazing. I mean, when I first came to Washington, because I've been in the swamp a lot longer than you have been, just to give our listeners a sense of what you're talking about, when I first came to Washington, the entire federal budget in 1984, when we had a conservative president, Ronald Reagan, but it was $1 trillion. We had just surpassed the $1 trillion mark, and we were very embarrassed by that. Oh, my God, $1 trillion. I can't imagine that much money. And we had just also surpassed the $1 trillion debt mark a year earlier. Now, here we are 40 years later. Now, prices are 3 times higher now. So, but still, the debt is now, what are we at, 35 trillion?
No, we're approaching 37.
37 trillion.
Yeah.
And our budget, if your numbers are right, the one that Biden has recommended, 7 trillion. So even if you adjust for inflation, that's a $4 trillion increase in just 40 years. And the debt has exploded by like eightfold adjusted for inflation. And neither part, here's the thing that I find demoralizing. It doesn't seem like we know Democrats love to spend money, but the Republicans do too, Senator.
Well, part of the problem is only, 28, 29% is discretionary. And everybody blames, well, it's mandatory, we can't touch that. And I'm just showing people, no, we can.
Yes.
Leave Social Security, Medicare alone. Let those go on, as they are. But everything else, again, just inflate based on the CPI, based on the rate of inflation and population. So you're basically spending the same amount of money. The example I use is a family of 4. If they make $100,000, have a baby,
yes,
and they could increase their spending from $100,000 to $125,000 to account for that population increase. With 3% inflation, now you're at $128,750. They do just fine. Well, government should do the same thing. So people need to understand we went to pandemic spending and we stayed on that enormous baseline. There's no justification for that. Come back down to a more reasonable baseline. Again, you still are going to inflate spending, but we should be just fine. There's no justification for keeping that baseline as high as it is.
So, this is what is called the ratchet effect of government. And this is something that many economic historians have been talking about, especially if they're of the libertarian mind frame, which is that every time we have a crisis in America, the budget goes up, goes back to the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, the Cold War, and then COVID. And what happens, Senator, is we increase the spending during the crisis, but it never comes back down to its previous level. And that's what you're talking about now.
And again, part of the problem is nobody even knows how much we spend. A few years ago when we were debating it on this, I asked my Republican colleagues, hey, anybody know how much we spent last year? Nobody raised their hands. I went up to the Washington Press, asked them the same question. Somebody said, well, it's over $1 trillion. No, that's just discretionary. So, Steve, here we are. We're the largest financial entity in the world. Congress, we're supposed to be the board of directors, and literally nobody knows in total how much we spend because we argue over little bits. There's a $100 billion spending bill, So nobody puts the whole thing together and go, holy, but you mean we went from $4.4 trillion to $7 trillion, which, by the way, I knew when we went from hundreds of billions to trillions, it was going to be a big problem for us. Well, what's just 1 or 2 more trillion, right?
So, Senator, we have about 3 minutes left, and I'm talking to Senator Ron Johnson, the Republican from Wisconsin, who is one of the few real, true blue fiscal conservatives in the United States Senate. In the last couple of minutes that we have left, could you summarize what you think then needs to be done? What do we need to get done to get this massive deficit down? I mean, with the last 12 months, we borrowed $2 trillion.
So, again, pick your year, 1998, 2014, 2019, inflate those spending numbers, and then use those in our budget process. We're going to have to pass at least 1, if not 2 budgets. We'll set the caps. Now, budget reconciliation can only be used on mandatory spending, but we literally have $1.3 trillion of other mandatory spending, not Social Security, Medicare, or even Medicaid. That's been the trick. They've taken discretionary spending, moved into mandatory, so they open up big holes in mandatory. So look at the entire budget, use those numbers, get President Trump to embrace that rather than try and get rid of the debt limit.
Yes.
Say we don't have to increase the debt limit. We'll just balance the budget based on 1998 spending as a baseline, inflated for population and inflation. It's simple to do, and again, it's hard to justify not doing it.
As I read your piece, that was this excellent piece in the Wall Street Journal by Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, and I just did the back of the envelope math. If we had just, adjusted for inflation, going back to the pre-pandemic baseline, we would save $1 trillion a year.
Right.
$1 trillion. That's one with 12 zeros.
That's 1,000 billion.
Yeah, 1,000 billion.
Or a million.
Last question before I let you go. A lot of our listeners are confused about this debt ceiling issue. It was suspended until January 1st. As I look at the numbers, Senator, the debt ceiling is somewhere around 32 or 33 trillion, but you just said we're borrowing 36 or 37 trillion. If my math is right, that means we're already above the debt ceiling. What's going on here?
Well, Kevin McCarthy, even though the House Freedom Caucus literally came up with a bill to increase the debt ceiling by $1.5 trillion, McCarthy took that bill and rather than negotiate for $1.5 trillion, he just suspended it, which McConnell's done in negotiations as well. Yeah. So, no, we've got big spenders in both parties, so they just suspended it. So, no, it comes roaring back, and now President Trump just wants to do away with it. I'm sorry. I'm a big supporter of President Trump and what he's done. I part company with him here. Debt ceiling is about the only discipline, the only control we have over out-of-control spending.
Absolutely. I could not agree more with you, Senator. I mean, this idea that we're just going to get rid of the debt ceiling, it's like I used an analogy, when I was kids, we used to when we were 15, 16 years old, my parents had a little liquor cabinet. And, sometimes we'd be bad kids and we'd raid the liquor cabinet and drink some of the vodka and da-da-da. And, my parents finally figured out what we were doing, so they put a lock on the on the liquor cabinet door. What you're saying is we don't need a lock on the liquor cabinet. And not you, but a lot of even some Republicans saying, let's get rid of the debt ceiling. And I say no.
No, we have to maintain that. Again, the best way to handle it, so it's not a problem, is don't exceed it.
Yeah.
Pretty simple. Balance the budget. And again, I'm showing it's entirely possible to do that because even though we cut taxes, revenue continues to increase. This year we'll get about $5.5 trillion worth of revenue. It's up. We vastly exceeded what the CBO projected for the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So it's entirely doable, eminently reasonable.
Well, Senator, thank you so much for joining us. That's Ron Johnson, the Republican from Wisconsin, who is one of the few voices for fiscal sanity in Washington. Folks, we'll be right back. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
Eden Memorial Chapels understands Jewish funerals can take many forms. Some are Orthodox, while others are more conservative or of a Reformed nature. There's no one better. With services close to all New York and New Jersey cemeteries, Eden Memorial Chapels offer fair and balanced pricing and can provide easy transfer of you and your loved ones to Israel. While you're grieving, they're here to take care of all the details so that you deal with less bureaucracy and have more peace of mind. Go to EdenMemorial.com. That's EdenMemorial.com.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is Steve Moore. This is the More Money Show. This is WABC. I hope everyone had a wonderful New Year's. Now, to stick with the theme that we've been talking about for the last 30 or so minutes on this show about the out-of-control government in Washington, there's no better person to talk about that than former Senator of the great state of Texas, Phil Gramm, who is still incredibly active. You see him almost every other week in the Wall Street Journal. He was one of the people who made the Reagan tax cut happened in 1981. He's one of the people who passed one of the first lean budgets we had in 50 years in Washington. When he was a Democrat at that time, he was a Democrat in the House. He was also the co-author of the Gramm-Rudman bill, which did put caps on spending. Senator Phil Gramm, I'm a great admirer of yours. Thanks so much for coming on.
Well, Steve, thank you, and thank you for saying all those things. I wish my mother were alive here.
Well, I mean everything I said, and by the way, your pieces in the Wall Street Journal are absolutely fantastic, and they're filled with not rhetoric, but facts, and that's what I love about the stuff that you write. I think you're in there about every 2 or 3 weeks, and it's wonderful to educate people on this. I've so much I want to talk to you about, Senator. I want to start with, I don't know if you heard the tail end of my conversation with Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, but he's sort of despondent about what is going on with the budget. And when you came to Washington a few years before I did, but back then, remember we had $1 trillion budget, and now we have a $7 trillion budget. And I guess the broad question is, and we tried everything. And I think a lot of my listeners, and we have listeners all over the country on this show, are kind of, they're throwing up their hands and saying, neither party wants to do anything about this. We're on a road to fiscal ruin. How do you see things?
Well, first of all, it's true when I came to Washington, the federal debt was a lot lower, but don't forget when I came to Washington, we'd had 7 years of 9.2% inflation on average.
I remember.
Prime interest rates were 21.5%.
I remember. Yep.
And the inflation rate was 13.4%. So we had a very serious problem. And basically, the job was setting priorities. And one of the things I tried to do with Gramm-Rudman was to force government programs to compete against each other for available funds.
Yes.
Now what happens is that we end up funding everybody's priority.
Yes.
And it's simply a matter, it's simple in logic. In politics, it's difficult. And the simple logic is you make decisions about what's important. The problem is everybody who wants something from Washington is looking over the congressman's left shoulder, and not enough people are looking over the right shoulder.
That's true.
That are concerned about spending in the future. But I think there is reason to be deeply concerned. And in the end, there will be a reckoning. Governments don't go broke based on how much they borrow. They go broke when they can't pay interest on the debt.
Yes.
And we're heading in that direction. There's no doubt about it.
Well, right now, because I talk a lot about this on the show, the exact point that you just made, Senator, which is that interest on the debt, just the interest payments on this money we've already spent is I believe $1 trillion now, which is outrageous.
More than we spend on national defense.
Amazing. So this is a big problem, and I don't know what you think about this debt ceiling. I do want to talk to you about the trade issue, but before we go to that, there are many Republicans, and some of my fiscally conservative friends even are saying we should get rid of the debt ceiling. I'm opposed to that.
Yeah,
I'm opposed to
it too.
Okay.
Look, every reform we've done on spending, we did on a debt ceiling.
Yes, I know.
It's the time when the bill collector's at the door. And that's when, families get together, they pay their bills.
Yep.
But they get together around the kitchen table, talk about what the problem is, get out the butcher knife, cut up the credit cards. And that's what we've got to do. So I'm very much opposed.
Me too.
To the idea of eliminating the debt ceiling. And I made a couple of calls to try to be sure that didn't happen when the House.
Well, you were there, and I was there in the 90s when you all in the Congress the Republican Congress had the showdown with then President Bill Clinton, and it was over, that debt ceiling, and you stuck to your guns. We had a government shutdown, but my goodness, that was the only time in my lifetime we ever balanced the budget.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what we did, of course, is we had the spending reduction, the cut in the capital gains tax.
Yep.
And so this is clearly something we shouldn't do. This is people thinking about what would make it easy for me now relative to what is good for America in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think the whole driving force here was that the Trump people don't want to fool with the debt ceiling. Well, the problem is the debt ceiling is the sort of come to Jesus moment.
Yes, exactly.
And I don't want to eliminate it, and it's not going to be eliminated either.
Yeah, I just have to tell you, there are a number of your former colleagues in the Congress and the Senate who just say, oh, this is too hard, we shouldn't have a debt ceiling. And I think that is a big mistake because you got Graham Rudman done with the debt ceiling, which cut spending. We got we balanced the budget in the late 1990s because we got serious about the debt ceiling.
Graham Rudman was an amendment to the debt ceiling.
I know it was. I know. The problem is a lot of these people don't remember that. I mean, you and I are getting old, but a lot of people don't remember what you did.
When the House was able to force Obama into some spending control by
the Budget Control Act,
using the budget.
I know, and it worked. We forced them to cut spending. It's the only time it ever happens. I want to switch gear because I don't want to abuse your time, but you and I were talking privately the other day because I wanted your advice about this whole trade issue. And I'm a big Trump guy, as you know, but I am uneasy about what he wants to do on tariffs. I think he's a good negotiator, but it worries me. He seems to be playing a bit of a dangerous game here. But you were telling me, I mean, you've had about 3 or 4 fantastic pieces in the Wall Street Journal about the whole history of tariffs. And you were telling me that, well, obviously many times that we've raised tariffs, it has not had a happy ending in terms of what happened with the U.S. economy. But you also made the point historically that the party that raises tariffs oftentimes loses the next election.
That's right. Not just oftentimes, almost always. And starting in 1828 with the tariff of abomination, abominations, the Whigs were destroyed by that tariff. Mm-hmm. Andrew Jackson was elected president. They lost control of the House and Senate, and we cut tariffs for the next 30 years by 72%. And had the most rapid economic growth rate of the 19th century. When the president has talked about the McKinley tariff.
Yeah, McKinley.
In 1890. But what happened in the following election, the Republicans got decimated and tariffs were cut until the beginning until after World War I. Mm-hmm. So, as I've said to people, look, assume that everything that is being said about tariffs in support of them is true, and everything that's being said is wrong. But assume it were right. if Congress raised tariffs, if there were a positive impact from it, it wouldn't be felt before the next election. You just feel all the negative impacts from it. If we have a big tariff increase, you increase the cost of things at Walmart, you're going to touch the spark plug of a running tractor, and you're going to feel it.
Now, have you talked to? I know you talk to a lot of the leaders of our country. Have you had the occasion to talk to Donald Trump about what you're saying?
No, I haven't. I would certainly welcome the opportunity to do it.
Well, we need to get you into the Oval Office when he's in the Oval Office.
We're going to lose the House and Senate if we fool with tariffs to any significant extent.
Now,
and
what do you think?
Going to work economically.
So let me kind of challenge you a little bit on this. Trump is saying that he wants to cut the corporate tax rate to 15% for things that are made in the USA and to raise the tax on things that are coming in from other countries. What's wrong with that?
Well, look, why do we buy things from other countries? We buy things from other countries because they can make them cheaper than we can.
Yes.
And we're better off making things that we make better than they do.
Right.
And that pay higher wages and generate higher rates of return.
Yes.
And so everybody benefits from trade.
By the way, just to interrupt you for 1 second, this is Adam Smith, right? This is the law of comparative advantage.
That's right. Nothing new or revolutionary about this.
Right. It's trade. Trade by definition benefits both the buyer and the seller, right? Because they're willing.
And they're voluntary decisions that people make to benefit themselves as consumers, as producers. And don't forget, we import 50% of our imports are things that are used as component parts of American manufacturing.
Right.
You want to destroy the American automobile industry? Impose a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico, and you'll do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the part of this that President Trump and some of his advisors don't know. And by the way, these are friends of mine, and I'm a great admirer of theirs, as many of our listeners are. But I think they don't completely understand that. I mean, in other words, when you put tariffs on steel, that just makes all our manufacturing items that we produce here more expensive.
Well, and look, there's 34 people that work in America using steel components for every one job in steel. So that when we impose that tariff on steel, for every job we created in steel or aluminum, and there were 2,300 of them,
oh my gosh,
we paid about $900,000 per job in extra cost and lost jobs elsewhere. Now, nobody can believe that paying $900,000 for a job that pays $60,000 makes any sense. But if you look at it in single entry bookkeeping, we created this job, and you don't look at what it costs and who else lost their job, then it looks like a good idea. But when you look at double entry bookkeeping, what it cost you, what you got, instead of just what you got, then it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, you know, you've been a powerful voice for that message. And, you know, Art Laffer, our mutual friend, always says that free trade is one of the pillars of prosperity, along with lower taxes and sound money and less government. And I think we always have to remember that. And we really do.
Yeah, and also, look, it's freedom. Who has the right to tell me that I have to pay, which I do, twice as much for sugar as any other person in any other developed country in the world, so that a small number of sugar producers can be rich?
It's absolutely, Senator, we're up against a hard break, but you're exactly right. It's just special interest pleading.
You take care. I got to run. God bless you, Steve. You're doing a great job.
Thank you, Senator Phil Gramm. You are a national asset, folks. This is the More Money Show.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. This is WABC, the top talk radio station in these United States. It's a pleasure to be with you. By the way, we have affiliates throughout the country, so thank you all for joining. Our ratings are excellent. It's because we have smart listeners like you take a little bit of time out of your Saturday afternoons to join us for the show. We try to make it fun. We try to make it lively. We try to make it educational. We try to help you make more money. This is still the holiday weekend. You know, the holiday isn't over, in my opinion, until Monday morning. So I hope you're all having a lot of fun. I hope you all had a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I'm a very happy guy by the outcome of the big game against Georgia the other night. And so these playoffs are really have been kind of fun to watch. I wanted to mention one other quick thing, that the weather outside is cold. I'm in Maryland, suburban D.C. It is cold today, but it's going to be a brisk, blustery day. But the sun is shining here. It's shining in most of the place along the East Coast. And so get out and enjoy. You know, you can bundle up, as my mom would say, and get out and take a walk or to go for a jog or go shopping and just get out. And it's invigorating to enjoy the cool air, and then you can come in and you can have some hot chocolate or a cup of coffee or, you know, something like that. So, a lot to talk about in this last hour. By the way, we will be taking your calls, folks. We're live and in color. And so I want to remind people that my main question for you, although I'm open to whatever is on your mind, but my main question for you is, do you agree with Steve Forbes and me that the simple and fair flat tax is the way to go? Let's eliminate 1,000 pages from the tax code, make it so simple, no loopholes, no special interest provisions. If you make 10 times more money than me, you're going to pay 10 times more taxes. But you're not going to have loopholes. You're not going to be able to find ways to shelter your income. We can put a lot of tax accountants out of business. We can maybe put H&R Block out of business. Not that I have anything against H&R Block, but I think it would be so much better for the economy if we didn't waste money and time just trying to figure out what our taxes are. The rates are too high. We are supporting and we are endorsing a 15% flat tax. That's what Steve Forbes and I wrote in the Wall Street Journal on December 31st, right before New Year's Day. We've gotten a huge response on this, mostly positive, but some negative. And I want to hear people who either don't like the idea or do like the idea. Throughout this second hour, mostly I will be taking your calls. And we've had some great guests on in the first hour, but I love to hear from you. This is Freedom of Speech Radio. And I especially, frankly, I like to hear from people who disagree with me. Now you feel free to call in if you do agree with me. I like that too. But I do enjoy it when people come and challenge me, because I'm not always right. Just ask my wife. She will tell you she doesn't think I'm right very often at all. But, if you've got a good response to, why we shouldn't have a flat tax, I want to hear it. Because I've never heard a good argument against it, frankly. I know people, that's going to be a tax cut for the rich. No, we're taking away all the special tax advantages that the rich, when Warren Buffett says, I pay a higher tax rate than my secretary, that's because, Warren, you take advantage of all the loopholes. We're going to get rid of the loopholes. You are going to pay your fair share, Warren Buffett, and Bill Gates. And, by the way, I love people who get rich. I think that's what makes America a special place. I'm not against rich people. I think they're the people who are the inventors and the innovators and the entrepreneurs and the people who have helped make our country great. And so I do believe that when you create something, you should, you deserve the fruits of your labor and your innovation. But, you're not going to get special advantages. Nope. You're not going to come to Washington. I was talking to Phil Gramm earlier on this show, and he was talking about all the people who come to Washington with their handout. And one of my favorite stories and one of my favorite historical presidents is Calvin Coolidge, who was president in the 1920s. I would say he was probably one of the 5 or 6 or 7 greatest presidents. And he was a true anti-big government guy, and he believed in freedom and free enterprise. And he had a sign on his desk in the Oval Office that said, 90% of the people who come to Washington want something they shouldn't have. And that is so true. The people come with their hand out, and usually they come out of Washington with a big stack of bills in their pocket. And that's not going to happen anymore with flat tax. We're not going to give away special interest favors, but we're going to make it simple. Postcard return. You can figure out your taxes in, 20 minutes, not 20 days. So I find it to be very positive in every respect. And but if you disagree with me, I'd love to hear from you. That number is 1-800-848-9222. A couple other quick things I wanted to mention to you all that I think are important to understand. And this is really important. I talked with Larry Kudlow a little bit this morning on his show, but I want to reiterate it, that this is not a healthy economy. It is not. I'm sorry. Joe Biden, you listen to his economists and you think, oh my gosh, this is the best economy we've ever had. And all Donald Trump has to do is just leave everything alone and we'll be prosperous. And I have to tell you, this is nonsense. This is nonsense. By the way, Paul Krugman, who was he was a columnist for the New York Times. I think he is retired as of today, or January 1st. He wrote this column saying Joe Biden will go down in history as a great president for his handling of the economy. I'm like, Paul Krugman, are you so insulated from real America that you actually think that this president that we have today rebuilt the American economy? I think he shattered it. I think we're going to spend years trying to dig ourselves out of the hole that Joe Biden put us into. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. The 3 Ds are what really undermined the Biden presidency. And those were, number 1, debt. The debt going up to nearly $37 trillion on his watch. I think it was an increase of about $8 trillion in 4 years. It's just disgusting. The next is deficits. Our deficits right now are $2 trillion a year, or just shy of that. That's larger than the entire federal budget as recently as 1985. And then you've got the other one that has been a killer is declining income. That's the 3rd D, declining income for American families. The average family lost about $500 to $600 in income over a 4-year period when you adjust for inflation. So there were no benefits. There were just costs to the American family. So how do you call that a success? I mean, seriously. And by the way, if someone who wants to call in, I would love to hear this. I would love to have somebody call in on the 1-800-848-9222 More Money hotline and defend Biden's record. I mean, really, I'd love to hear a good defense of why Joe Biden killed the Keystone Pipeline. Why did he spend $6-7 trillion we didn't have? Why did he prosecute, he and his Justice Department, bring these flim-flam lawsuits and allegations against Donald Trump? Why did they lose control of the border? Was it intentional? Were they trying to hurt our country? Or do you think it made any sense? I don't. I cannot understand for the life of me why he debased our currency, why he led the debt up by a record amount, why we had deficits of $2 trillion, why we lost control of our border, why we shut down American energy. That is some kind of weird ideology that a president would do that. But if you think that Joe Biden, who is still going to be in the White House now for about 2.5 more weeks, if you think he was a great president, or even a good president, let me know, because maybe I'm missing something, frankly. I look at what happened in Afghanistan. I look at what's happened in the Middle East. I look at what's happened in Ukraine. I don't see peace. I don't see prosperity. I don't see happiness in the country, although people are happy now because big changes are coming. By the way, I cannot wait for Inauguration Day. We're going to have a big, big event in Washington, D.C. We are really excited. A guy I just met recently, by the way, he came and visited me from Chicago, and he has these shirts that he's made up, and they're red shirts, they're red t-shirts, and in white letters on the front of the t-shirt it says, "Welcome back." Welcome back. And he's trying to get everybody who's going to the inauguration to wear these shirts so that when Trump drives by in his motorcade and he looks out, or when he's on those Capitol steps and he gives his speech, to the American people for the inauguration, that all he sees is a sea of red shirts that say, "Welcome back," because he's the second president in history who sat out a term and then came back and re-entered the White House. I forget I think the other one was, he was in the now I'm blanking out, in the 19th century. I'll have to look that up. But there was one other president who served a term, lost, and then made a comeback and was president for 4 more years. That's what Donald Trump is doing. It's so darn exciting. But my point is, Trump has a lot of work to do. And it is going to take a little bit of while to get this economy up and running again. Because we're in a deep hole right now. And you got 7% mortgages now. You've got interest rates rising again. You've got, a $2 trillion deficit. That is how much we're borrowing every year. $2 trillion. These are huge problems for our country. It's going to cost a lot of money, unfortunately, to get, the border secure. And by the way, Tom Homan, who is the new border czar. He's a border czar who's actually been to the border, unlike Kamala Harris, who is a border czar who I think went there one time for a photo op and then went home. This is a guy who is very serious, and you've seen him on Fox News. You see him on CNN. He's a serious guy. He is a compassionate guy. He doesn't want, to mistreat people. But if you're in the country illegally, you're going to have to either pay a fine, or if you do anything that is of criminal nature, we're going to deport you. I don't want to see, 10 million people deported. I don't want to see that. But I do want to see people penalized for coming in the wrong way, because it's not fair to the people who came in the right way. And you're talking to somebody who is very pro-immigration. I think immigrants are a huge, huge asset to our country, but you got to come in the right way. And I think Donald Trump agrees with me on that. I wanted to make one other quick point before we take our break, and that is something that I think you'll find kind of fun. And I'm just looking this up as I speak, because there is we are now in the year 2025, and it turns out that for those of you who are mathematically inclined, I think you'll kind of enjoy this, that it turns out the number 2025 is a magical number. I don't know how many of you know this, but my friend Scott Granis, who is a mathematical wizard, he was telling me of all the special features of the number 2025. And if you want to write this stuff down and check my numbers to make sure they're right, you're welcome to do that. But so 2025 is the square. 45 squared is 2025 So 45 is the square root of 2025. So it is a perfect square number, 2025. Here's kind of a fun one. If you take the addition of the 10 digits of our numerical system, you take 0 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9, and then you square the sum of those numbers. Guess what? It's 45, and 45 squared is 2025. Kind of interesting. Here's another one. The year 2020, the number 2025 is the sum of the cubes of all 10 digits. This is kind of a fun one. So if you take 0 cubed plus 1 cubed plus 2 cubed plus 3 cubed plus 4 cubed plus 5 cubed plus 6 cubed plus 7 cubed plus 8 cubed plus 9 cubed, and you add up those numbers, guess what? It adds up to 2025. 2020, that's amazing, isn't it? And the 2025 is also the product of two squares. So 9 squared times 5 squared equals 2025. One last one. It is the sum of 3 squares. 40 squared plus 20 squared plus 5 squared equal 2025. So, it's a magical number, and that means it's going to be a magical year. And we have a great show lined up for you today. I'm going to start taking your calls. 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-WABC. We'll be right back.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
We're having some fun this afternoon, folks. This is the More Money Show, where we talk about money, we talk about politics, we try to have some fun, we try to keep it light. By the way, there's a wonderful meme that we have on our hotline this weekend. By the way, are you all getting the hotline? If you're not getting our hotline, please write this down. Go to unleashprosperity.com and sign up for the daily hotline. It's an email that is absolutely free. It costs you absolutely nothing. I'm not selling you anything. I just want you to be smart. And I want you to be the smartest person in the room when you're talking about politics and finance and other things. And you can read our hotline probably 5 or 6 minutes every morning. It's just 5 or 6 bullet points. We always have a humor item at the end. And so you may enjoy that for a little chuckle every morning. But get it. It's go to unleashprosperity.com, sign up. There's no advertising. We're not going to hit you up for money. We just want you to be smart. And we provide it to you absolutely free. That's unleashprosperity.com. It's called the hotline, and give us your email. By the way, if you don't like it, you just unsubscribe and we'll take you off. But I think you will like it. We have Newt Gingrich. We have, members of the president's cabinet who read it. We have senators who read it. We have, many CEOs who read it. And so it should be the first thing you read every morning. It should be your caffeine in the morning. And that is the Unleash Prosperity hotline. But I bring it up because we had a kind of funny little meme in the hotline, this weekend. And it has Donald Trump, filling out his, when you go to Amazon and you have a shopping cart, of the things that you want to buy. And there's Donald Trump, and he's preparing his shopping cart. And in the shopping cart, he has Greenland, and he has the Panama Canal, and he has Canada, and, Lord knows what else he wants America to buy. I'd love your opinion about that, by the way. Should we buy Greenland? Is the Panama Canal, this is a more serious issue, are they ripping us off? Because we did build the Panama Canal. It was American lives, American money, and American know-how that canal was built. And now the Chinese seem to have more control over it than we do. But we are now going to get right to the lines. We're taking your calls pretty much through the rest of the hour, folks, because I want to hear from you. I learn from what you have to say and what is on your mind. And the topic of the day, but if you have something else you want to discuss, feel free to call in. But what I want to hear from you about is whether you support the plan that Steve Forbes and I have put out in the Wall Street Journal, saying we should have a 15% simple flat tax. And our first caller of the day is George. George, thanks so much for calling.
Hello, Mr. Moore. Appreciate you taking my call. So before I get to the point of what I think about the flat tax, I'd like to talk to you about something else, if you let me, please. Well, if you can do it quickly. I'll do it very quickly, okay. So I'd like to talk about the AI and, some of this new type of money, the crypto money here. Yes, crypto. What they don't talk about is the fact that making all this, okay, takes huge amount of energy. That's mean electricity here. Okay. Yes. And what it does here, those huge corporations which are pushing it, okay, they're going to make tons of money, but the cost of the energy will fall on you and all of us, okay, and small businesses and all this, and nobody's talking about it. Okay, so George, let me just interrupt you. I think you make a good point. It does take a lot of energy, especially the mining to get the coins and the tokens. So my question for you is that, are you telling me you are not in favor of cryptocurrencies? No. My point is simple, okay? There is a bottleneck when you come to power-producing energy here, and that's a crack of the problem here, okay? Because you can have cheaper energy, whatever Mr. Carlo is talking about, but as long as you have a bottleneck and there's just not enough power processing plants in this country here, and they don't build any new, as far as I know here, that would mean that supply and demand. Okay, all right, George, let me respond to that. I think you're making. Okay, George, hold on. I think you're making a good point. And I think you're right that AI and cryptos will use a lot of energy. And that's why we have to produce a lot of energy. We have to produce natural gas. We have to use our coal, our oil, our wind power, our nuclear power. We have to use it all. And if we do, I think we'll have enough energy to pay for this. And I think it is really imperative, and this is one man's opinion,
But, I was nominated by Donald Trump to be on the Federal Reserve Board. I was not, I did not make it through that process, but, I do know a lot about the monetary system. And I like the idea, folks, that, we have alternative currencies to these arrogant, self-serving central bankers around the world who think that they should have command and control over the world economy. I'm against that. And I think this is a decentralization, populist movement so that people don't have to depend on fiat government currency, and especially at a time when you have governments borrowing trillions and trillions of dollars. Great call, George. Let's see if we can get to Dan from Westchester.
Yeah, Steve.
Hi, Dan.
Yeah, very interesting. That guy was on earlier on another show. And
Okay.
I heard him earlier. But
well, you sound like you're a regular. Okay, what do you got first? What do you think of the flat tax?
Okay, the flat tax. I do my own taxes.
Okay.
I'm not a tax guy, but I think everybody should do their own taxes because they'd see what a mess it is.
Yes.
And it doesn't make any sense anymore.
Right.
So,
it doesn't.
Yeah, I favor a national sales tax.
I knew someone was going to, Dan, bless you for calling, because I've always been an advocate of that as well. I think, that might even be better than the flat tax as the national sales tax.
Because it's not regressive.
It is. And also, and by the way, then the government wouldn't even have to know how much money you make, because you just pay your tax when you purchase things, and rich people purchase a lot more than poor people do, so they're going to pay more tax. Dan, I've always loved that idea. I'm so glad you called, because this
Listen, Steve, the reason I called this morning is you asked a question earlier about why would New York do what they do and tax-wise.
Why?
Well, now listen, I've lived in New York for my whole life.
Yeah.
So I've been watching this minuet all of these years. I know why they do it. And I know the corruption that's there. And the corruption is this. In New York, the Constitution of New York says that you must have a balanced budget, which means that should keep the politicians at bay, right? But guess what they discovered? They discovered a way around the Constitution, and it's called an authority. So what they've been doing forever, I think they started with the MTA. They just created this thing called an authority, which isn't government, it isn't private enterprise, but it's off budget.
Yes.
So whenever they have a problem in Albany balancing the budget, they just say, okay, let's just take this piece and make it an authority, and bingo, we're balanced. Now, now you know how many authorities are in New York?
Look, I don't. Hold on, George. Dan, I don't want to get too in the woods here, but I understand. I understand. Hold on. Okay, Dan, thanks for calling. I appreciate your call. I know what Dan is talking about, and this is the idea that they do have all these, they're called authorities, and they're like government agencies, but they're not covered by the budget. They want something like $60 billion for the New York subway system. And finally, I saw that the powers that be there in New York basically said, no, we're not giving you all of this money. The transit system is so mismanaged in New York that they want to put a tax on people who take their car into New York. And I'm sorry. I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's going to hurt the retail companies and retail firms there who sell hot dogs and sell furniture and sell clothing and all of that stuff. If people can't come in, if you're going to charge them a congestion price for coming in, they're not going to come in. They will shop somewhere else, and it'll be believe me, folks, I think that tax that they're talking about is going to be the death of New York. Let's see if we can slip in Joe from New York before we have to take a break. Joe, you're on WABC.
Thank you, Steve. I want to say yes to Greenland. Yes to the Panama Canal, no to Canada.
Okay.
Okay. As far as the
wait. What about Canada?
I said no to Canada. Leave it alone.
Okay. Why not Canada?
It's too liberal.
That's true. It is. Canada is like becoming a socialist country, and Trudeau is driving that country right over a cliff. You're exactly right.
It's too liberal. As far as the flat tax, I think it's a great idea. It's long overdue. Here's where I have a question, and I am in the real estate business, commercial. Yes. I am a believer that it should be a flat tax. Here is where I believe you're correct on capital gains. That should be reduced, and it should be reduced, if not eliminated, dramatically, primarily for primary residents, family homes, anything of that nature where families are sitting on real estate and they would consider selling it, but the capital gains consequence is too extreme and they don't want to do a 1031 exchange. I think they should be eliminated.
Now wait, hold on, Joe. Yes. So what I would favor, what I'm talking about is a 15% capital gains tax, which is a lot lower than the current capital gains tax today. Now, my friend Steve Forbes, who I adore, I mean, he is my he really is my mentor. He would say zero capital gains tax. I'm willing to do it at 15%. But that would still, so you're going to pay something, but you're not going to pay a confiscatory tax. What do you think about that?
I think that's great. I think your 10% suggestion primarily is the ideal. That would be the better way to go.
All right.
I also believe that one of the issues with the housing crunch, it's not an inventory problem. You have a tremendous amount in my area. I'm in Westchester as well, too. Yes. The Metro New York area, you have incredible investments here of people in my area code, my zip code, where they have 2 or 3 investment properties as well as their primary residence. And what happens is it's driving up the market to the extreme where the entry-level person can't afford to buy a house and they're stuck and they can't move. With the capital gains problem, if you fix it on your suggestion, which would be great, there are residents here or older people that would free up their homes, and I think it would start to unfreeze and unclog this market regardless of the rates.
Now, Joe, it's a great point, and I've got to take a break. But before I let you go, I'll ask you one last question, and we have to answer it quickly because we're up a hard break. What about the mortgage deduction? So I'm saying we're going to get rid of that because most people don't take it anymore. What do you say?
I completely agree. I think that's the best way to do it. I think get rid of the mortgage deduction because that's been it. President Trump in his first term had the SALT tax.
I know, and I want to get rid of that
and
too.
That was all related. It's all hand in glove.
Yeah. All right. Hey, Joe, great call. Thank you so much. That's why I take callers, because we have so many smart listeners, folks. This is the More Money Show. We'll take more of your calls. 1-800-848-9222, right after this short break.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. We're having a lot of fun on the More Money Show this afternoon, the first More Money Show of 2025. Thank you so much for listening. You are the ones who make this show a success. And thank you for people around the country that are listening. I know we have, by the way, we're getting a lot of calls from New York and Connecticut, New Jersey, and thank you all for calling in. But come on, where are the people in Georgia and Maine? And we've gotten calls from Chicago and other places. I'd love to hear from people around the country. The issue of the day is the flat tax. And I'm going to get to, I think next up is Gordon in Brooklyn. But before I get to you, Gordon, I want to make one quick point. And if you'll stick with me for a few minutes on this, I think it really is important. And it's something we've talked about. And it's not an economic issue. It's really a kind of human rights issue. And it's about how we can be a kinder nation and a nation that is forgiving and gives second chances to people. And I'm talking about our criminal justice system, which as I find out more and more about it, I find it more and more troubling. And so I've been looking at these statistics that are happening in America today with respect to our incarceration rate and our recidivism rate. And what these statistics are telling me, folks, and by the way, this is not my area of expertise. I'm just looking at the statistics. I bet a lot of you listening to the show know more about this subject than I do. But I just look at the statistics and I find them heartbreaking that we have the highest recidivism. I mean, we have the highest, virtually the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. Now, I am very much in favor of putting violent criminals behind bars. I'm not soft on crime. Believe me, I'm not soft on crime. But I do believe we're putting too many people in prison. And if you disagree with me on that, I'd like your view on it. Because again, this is not my area of expertise. But how can America have such an incredibly high incarceration rate? And many of the people who are being incarcerated are young. They're in their teens or 20s. And sometimes if they're dangerous, they belong behind bars. One of the reasons I think we have such a high incarceration rate is because we have such crappy schools. And it's just, we're not training kids to be functional adults, and that parents, we're responsible too. And I am the parent of 3 kids, and it's tough being a parent. I know that. I have 3 sons, but these are really bad numbers. We have there are 2 million Americans that are in jail or in prison today. Second of all, and this is even more heartbreaking, the recidivism rate. That is, recidivism is when someone is released from jail or prison and that they reappear, they commit another crime and they're back in jail. The recidivism rate is well above 60%. And in some states as high as 80%. So what does that tell you? Again, I'm not an expert, folks, but I just look at those statistics and I'm saying, oh my God, we're putting people in prison and we're turning them into professional criminals. We're not rehabilitating them. And by the way, if you've got a 60 to 70% recidivism rate, that's telling you that the prison system isn't a deterrent. It's not deterring crimes if people are in prison and then they committed a crime knowing that they might have to go to prison. And so there has to be a better way. There must be. And we need to find ways that we're training people who are in prison. We need better training programs so that they can come out and be functional, productive adults. Because, look, and also when a 17 or 18-year-old creates a crime, even if it's a violent crime, the idea of putting them in jail for 40 or 50 years, I hate to see that human life be. And I know these people maybe some of them have murdered people, but, I don't know. Folks, I think there has to be a better way, and what we're doing right now is not working. So that's my little riff today. And I'd love to hear from people who know any more about the criminal justice system than I do. I just know the stats, and I find them to be heartbreaking. But let's get back to the subject of the day, which is the flat tax and the economy. And I believe next up, Mr. Producer, is Gordon from Brooklyn, who's been waiting very patiently.
Yes, thank you, Steve. It's always worth waiting to get on your show here.
Well, thank you so much for listening, Gordon. And you live in Brooklyn. And yes. What do you got for us today?
Well, I think you have a great show, and I listen every week. But on this
thank you. I'm blushing. I'm so pleased about that. Because I'm new to this, I'm not a professional radio talk show host. John Katsimatidis gave me this job. I try to get better. I know there are a lot of people better than I am, but I really enjoy it, and I love talking to people like you.
Yeah. On this particular issue of the flat tax,
yes.
I have to respectfully disagree.
Oh, no, Gordon, why?
I think that it is a losing issue for Republicans, and I'll tell you why, very succinctly. I'll tell you why. In 1986, the Republican Congress passed a bill reducing the number of tax brackets to 2, a 12% one, I believe, and a 28% one.
Yes.
I found myself as a middle-income person in the same tax bracket as people earning many times more money than I was making. And I got annoyed at this, very annoyed. And as a result, perhaps, the Republicans lost the Senate that year. In 1986, they had control from 80 to 86, but they lost it after that bill.
I was there. But Gordon, so I get the drift of what you're saying, and here's my comeback to you, and I'd like a quick response to it, and then we've got a bunch of other people waiting. But my point is, let's say, you were saying, wait, I have to pay the same rate as, somebody who's making 5 times as much money as I am.
Yes.
And my retort to you is, wait a minute, okay, if they make 5 times more money than you do, they should pay 5 times more tax, and they shouldn't get availability of all the loopholes and so on. And so that's why I want a flat rate. Everybody pays the same rate, but if somebody makes 5 times more money than you do, they pay 5 times more tax. If they make 10 times more money, they pay 10 times more tax. If they make 100 times more, then they pay 100 times more tax. What's wrong with that, Gordon?
Well, I'm glad you have that retort. I would only say that perhaps if you look at the amount of money they have left after paying the tax, it's quite significant. A very high-income person has a lot more money left than a middle-income person.
All right, Gordon. All right, I'm going to let you go because thank you, great call. But I'm going to respond to what Gordon just said. The places with lower tax rates have better economies. If you place a high tax rate on working, on investing, if you tax something, you get less of it. This is something Larry Kudlow and Arthur Laffer and Steve Forbes and and the evidence is crystal clear on that. When you have lower tax rates, good things happen. Why is New York a mess? Why is California a mess? Why is New Jersey a mess? Why is, some of these liberal blue states, my home city of Chicago a mess? Because they tax so high, people leave or they stop working or they stop creating businesses or they invest somewhere else. And that's why you want a low flat rate tax. Gordon makes some good points, but I disagree with him, even though I really appreciate his kind words. Let's try to get to Sue to Manhattan. From Manhattan. Sue, are you there? Okay, I think we lost her. Is Jan still with us from Long Island? Okay, what about Dave from Connecticut? Dave, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Dave, you're next.
Steve, I'll try to be quick. I'm in favor of the low flat rate tax. The problem is the capital gains, which is mainly a tax on the inflation-adjusted value of the long term. And it would take a complicated mathematical equation, to time affix the value of how long you've had that asset. So generally, I'm in favor of a capital gains differential, half the rate. And I'll leave it at that. And the other thing I want to mention, to save
hold on before we move on, because you made a good point, and I want to make people understand that we do have a differential rate between capital gains income and, income from labor or work. And one of the reasons we do that is because, when you put money at risk, you risk losing it. So there's been a preferential tax. All I'm saying, Dave, is that, if we get the rate low enough, you don't have to have a differential. In other words, you can tax the work income at 15% and you can tax the capital gains income at 15%. And I think everybody comes out ahead. What do you say about that?
I agree with that. The convenience may offset the fact that you're getting paid back in depreciated dollars for your capital appreciation. Briefly, on the national debt, the interest, which is $1 trillion a year now, we need that to leverage the asset value that the federal government has with all the property. And let me run it through the water rights, the timber rights, the grazing rights, the mineral rights, all of that stuff. There must be a way to sell in commodity asset value bonds. That when you get paid back in the future, it is the future value of all those mineral rights and water rights and grazing rights. And you could get away with a much lower interest rate when you're not just paying back fiat money. You're actually getting a future value of a commodity. And I think we could save a lot of money on the national debt interest if people would take the future asset value of minerals. Let's take advantage of it, leverage that asset.
You are 100% correct, my friend. Dave, thank you so much for calling. Great minds do think alike, because I've been writing a lot about this recently, that we could be selling off assets that are not being used by the federal government and put them in the productive private sector. And that includes federal lands. And I'm not talking about federal lands that are in Yosemite or Yellowstone or, or national parks. I'm talking about non-environmentally sensitive lands that are not being used by the government, and that people would buy that. We could build housing on it. We could, use them for, for businesses, and the land has value. We could also, lease or sell land that has minerals and or energy resources like oil and gas and coal. And then think about the incredible mineral situation. We've talked about this many times on this show with my friend Ned Mamula, who's one of the top geologists in the country, who tells us he believes that the value of these minerals that could be mined with existing mining technology is about $10 trillion. Now, if the government was to say take 20% of that and the private sector developer would get the other 80%, we're talking about $2 trillion that we could reduce our national debt. There's also an estimated $40 trillion of oil, gas, and coal. So, take 20% of that. If my math is right, that's $8 trillion. In other words, you see what we're doing? We're reducing our national debt. What about the national spectrum, the electronic spectrum that we use for the internet and for, communications purposes? That is worth hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, maybe trillions of dollars. Let's auction those off. What about, here's my idea, folks, and I'm thinking about this and I wonder what you all think about this. We have all of these special visa programs and I'm in favor of them. I think we should let in temporary workers. We should allow in the brainiacs who work in computers and technology. It's one of the things that's made our technology industry so dominant. But why don't we auction off those? In other words, when Microsoft says, well, we need these engineers and we need these visas, they should buy them. Because, the most valuable asset in the entire world, and I think Donald Trump has said this himself, the most valuable asset there is that United States passport. Everybody listening to this show, I think most of you, I think 98% of you are in this country legally. You're either born here or you have a legal visa to be here. There may be a few people who are here illegally that are listening to this show. But the point is, when you think about it, we won the lottery of life. We really did. We won the lottery of life by being born in the greatest country on the planet. And we could have just as easily been born in Mexico or Venezuela or Yugoslavia or all these other countries where you have havoc going on and you don't have the prosperity and the freedom that this great, great country has. But if we're going to allow people in, and we should allow people in, why not auction off those visas, especially the ones that are helping industry, where the industry is asking for the visas from the U.S. government? Yeah, you can bring in that engineer from India, but you're going to have to pay taxpayers, I don't know, $50,000, $100,000. In some cases, these guys are such brainiacs, the government would pay $1 million. People would pay $1 million to bring these people in. And that would be a good way to reduce our deficit and make our economy more efficient. We're going to take one last quick break. This is the More Money Show. I think we have time for one more caller when we get back. Stick with us, folks. I hope you're having a wonderful holiday weekend.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Folks, we have exactly 90 seconds left before we have to take our final break. So Sue from Manhattan called right back when we weren't able to get her the first time. Sue, thanks for trying again. What do you got for us? We only got about 60 seconds left. Is Sue there?
Hello, Steve?
Oh, hi. Who's this?
Stu. Steve, quick
okay,
question.
What do you got for us?
Number one, how do you equate the cost of labor in China for what the shipyard worker in Pascagoula is getting? And as far as the flat tax, you talking about a flat tax on business as well?
Yes, a flat tax on business and on labor income. Everybody pays 15%. Everybody pays their fair share. It's simple. It's pro-growth. It's good for America. It's going to make us the number one country in the world. Absolutely. That is what I am in favor of. Folks, have a great, great rest of your weekend.